So, we are here today with Bruce Griffith, longtime member of the church from Hayden, Arizona originally, and then later Kearney. Brother Griffith, welcome. As you know, we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Globe Steak this year, and we're happy to be able to talk to you about some of your memories here, not just with the Globe Steak, but especially with what used to be the Hayden Branch and Ward, and then later the Kearny Ward. So would you be able to share with us maybe a little bit what it was like as a young person growing up in Hayden, Arizona, in the Hayden Branch?
You bet. What can I help you with? You just want me to narrate a little bit?
Narrate a little bit, yes.
We moved here when I was 3.5 months old. My father became deathly ill. He was working at the smelter in Garfield, Utah, and became deathly ill. And they told him he could maybe live till the end of the year if he could get to a warmer climate. And so he finally was able to get up on crutches and make it to down here. This is the closest place to Utah that the company owned property, and they said he could transfer. And so when I was 3.5 months old, they bundled me up and off we went on all the dirt roads into Hayden, Arizona. Very remote and place. There was not one paved road into Hayden, and not only that, but when you were traveling, you knew you were going to have to stop and change flat tires on a regular basis. It was quite hard to just get in here where all this mining was going on, and that was a copper mine. We settled on Hayden, Arizona, and found there weren't many members of the church here. In fact, there was, when we first got here, we were in the California Mission, and when they had the district meetings, they were held up in Prescott, Arizona. So we had to travel nearly 2 days when I was a kid to go to district meetings. And sometime after that, they put us in the unit into the East Mesa Steak. They had steaks in Mesa, and by that time my dad was the branch president, and they'd had counselors and regular meetings. I know when I was a little kid, sometimes didn't have enough priesthood to even have the sacrament. Some of the young boys would be gone and playing ball, and there'd be a rainstorm, so the bus couldn't make it back into town, and going through the washes, and so they didn't even have a priest to bless the sacrament. That didn't happen very often, but the men were working shift work, and we were meeting in a little house on top of a hill called the Lodge Hall, and it was interesting because that's where every lodge in town met, and we would have to go in on Sunday mornings and clean out all the paraphernalia, the cigarettes and all the trays and everything, and get it cleaned up so we could have church. It was up on top of the hill, and that's where we met. It was after being there for a while, they finally decided they were going to build a chapel in town. That took a lot of work. We got a lot of non-members helping do the work, and the sisters did a lot of work having bake sales and making money enough to build it, because in those days, the church didn't have the finances to participate in building, so you had to raise the money yourselves. So it was quite an interesting thing. That building finally was dedicated, and that was in 1961. And
Do you remember the dedication?
I remember it quite well because I had just gotten old enough to go on a mission. I'm not real sure. I was either the fourth or the fifth person to ever go on a mission from there. They used to not accredit a young man on going on a mission out of your unit if he was going out of a college ward. So that kind of that kind of played a funny thing. So whether I was accredited as fourth or fifth or whatever, but the first missionary that went out there was Brother Pace, and I know that was early enough that he was married and left his wife as a operator at the phone company. Then her sister-in-law Nancy Pace became an operator there. Remember that well, because in those days you pick up the phone, and they used to have a ring thing but they just replaced that when I was a little kid, and so you didn't have to ring it anymore. Just pick it up, and Nancy would say, "Number, please," and I want number 23, and she'd ring it. It was an interesting life.
Do you remember who came to dedicate the chapel in 1961?
And I remember it well because that was President
Harold B. Lee?
Harold B. Lee. It was because he interviewed me for my mission, and he was so tired. He'd been riding on those roads, and he sat down in the bishop's office, and he interviewed me for probably 20 or 30 minutes. It was quite an interview. I never forget that he remembered my name from that day on. I'd go to a state conference, and he'd look down and say, "Oh, hey, Brother Griffith, how are you doing?" And he'd call me by name. How on earth does general authority do that? But it amazed me. But from that time on, he called me by name whenever he saw me. That was amazing.
Does that building still exist?
That building does still exist. When they built this building in Kearney, they sold the building to I think it was a Sarco in that day, and then now it went to Kennecott, and I don't know who owns it now. Maybe it's back in the Sarco's name, but they paid. It was a well-built building, and so we acquired enough money from that to have a substantial down payment on this building when he built it here in Kearney. So that was very nice. A lot of non-members helped building it.
What, now, you, at some point, moved to Kearney after your mission, after you began your family.
When we first moved here, of course, there was no town of Kearney. And so that in 1960 was the last year they had a school in Hayden and a school in Ray. And even though it was owned by the same company, both the companies, they kept them separate for mining and smelting. And so the mine was in Ray, and it was owned by Kennecott, and the Sarco owned the smelter in Hayden. And they were 20 plus miles away from each other, and there was a dirt road in between them. And then they decided to open pit the mine in Ray, and so they decided to dig up all of Ray, and they had to move the people that were living there. So they built the town of Kearney here, and built a school here, and it started to look up. They paved the roads and all kinds of fancy stuff. It was, and then they had the Ray branch was done away with, and the branch in in Hayden was changed the same day that they dedicated the chapel in March of 1961. President Lee made a bishop there, and the first bishop was Bishop Wright. And my father had become the branch president again, and so he was the last branch president. And he was released that day, and it became a ward, and I was called on a mission, and Harold B. Lee came to do all of that. So it was quite a day.
When did you first move to Kearney?
In 1942, I was about 3 months old. My father...
No, Kearney.
Oh, in Kearney.
Because you used to live here in Kearney, correct?
Yes. Now, that was a transition. Of course, in 1960, I went on my mission, and they started to build the town here in about 60, and everybody moved out here, and little by little from both towns, because it was a nice new town. And so they started moving, and I was on my mission and came home 2 years later and went to college. And so I wasn't personally involved in much of that transition when they moved out here. And but I moved here when I got married. I'd gone down from BYU to the University of Arizona and got married, and I bought a house here. And so that was in 67. So that's when I basically came back here myself.
So you and your wife, how many children do you have?
Just 8.
Just 8. So
they're winners.
You raised a large family here in Kearney, in the Kearny Ward. What was it like raising a family here in Kearney?
Well, it was kind of interesting because this community has been kind of a roller coaster. At one time, it got to a size where actually we had 2 seminaries, and the chapel was filled, and it was over 600-700 members in the ward. It was quite a sizable ward.
2 seminaries, was one in Hayden and the other in...
No, they were both
Kearney?
here in this building. In fact, I was teaching seminary here. And so I taught one of the classes, and my sister taught the other one for a while too. So it was interesting that we had that many seminary kids. It was a good, and things were buzzing. It really was, but it's not near that level anymore.
Now, you were living here in 1974 when the Globe Stake was created. Previous to that time, Kearney did not go. I mean, Kearney and Globe were not in the same stake. Talk a little bit about, if you can, Kearney before the Globe Stake was created, and then perhaps what your thoughts were once the Kearny Ward got moved into the Globe Stake and the Globe Stake was created.
It's real interesting that there was not a Globe Stake. In fact, I remember back when we were in the East Mesa Stake, there was not a stake in Tucson. And we went to the Southern Arizona Stake, and headquarters were in St. David. And there was not one stake in Tucson. They had to go to St. David. And then they created a Globe, I beg your pardon, a Tucson stake. And that was exciting. It was getting close here. And then they created a North Tucson stake, and we moved into that. And then the brethren decided to create a Globe Stake. When they created the Globe Stake, they interviewed people, and they were thinking about putting all the mining communities into one stake. And there were 2 wards in Globe and 2 in Miami. And this was a large ward. And there was a large ward in San Manuel. And when they interviewed them, San Manuel said they would prefer not to be in the stake, that they wanted to stay in the Tucson stake. And so it did, and it's still in the Tucson North stake. And so they put that together, and then of course there was also a ward in Superior. So when the stake became in existence, there were two in Miami and one in Superior. But subsequent to that, the ward in Superior went back to a branch, and the two wards in Miami went back to one ward. So we probably have one of the smallest stakes in the church now.
What were your thoughts when you heard about, when the Globe stake was created? Obviously that meant you and your family would be going up to Globe instead of Tucson for stake meetings. Do you have any particular memories on what you thought of all that?
Well, I think it was well received in the whole ward. Sometimes when changes are made, there's people that have reservations, but that wasn't true of this unit. It was exciting, and people would be able to hold stake positions and participate in stake activities a little more than they had in the past, because this area was still quite removed from the Tucson stakes, and so it was not very often that people were participating in stake activities and stuff. So it was quite exciting to everyone.
Yeah, speaking of people being able to serve and stake callings and things, you mentioned something as we were visiting prior to beginning this interview, that you'd actually served as a high counselor to every stake president that we've had in the Globe stake. Do you want to elaborate on that any?
Well, it's just been an exciting thing. It really was, because I was able to serve in a lot of capacities, and it's been edifying, to grow as an individual. Callings can help all of us to grow, and then that's one thing. The Lord makes promises, is that He won't forget you. If you're called to something and you don't feel qualified, you're not the first person. Moses said, "I can't do that," and many of the brethren have felt overwhelmed by callings. But if you're willing to serve, the Lord will help you, and you will grow. And that's what we came here to earth for, was to grow. And so it's been exciting, and I have served for every stake president we've had so far, but now I'm getting so old but it's been exciting. I see, I glanced up at the board, and you're getting to that Pioneer Track.
Now, tell us about the Pioneer Track.
Well, one of the opportunities I had serving on the High Council was I love parties, and so I often was called to be involved in activities, whether they were stake parties or youth parties or whatever. I had, and after doing that, I had so much experience that when they started the treks and they would build the old hand carts, and the youth would take the hand carts and go on a trek, and some of the young adults would serve as the parents and things. And so when they did one of the treks, they did it through a very remote area.
Now let's back up for a second. When you say when they did one of the treks, weren't you like the chair or the person in charge of the trek?
Well, I was in charge of one trek, and they said, "Listen, we don't want anything easy where the kids are just goofing around. We want them to have enough of a tough experience that they can identify with the pioneers." And
do you remember about when this was? And I don't have the answer. I remember about when it was. I wasn't on the trek itself, but seems like it's been 15 or 20 years at least.
Yeah,
Probably more like
yeah.
20, I would
Yeah, it's
think.
probably been at least 20 years. And so when they said they wanted something tough, I got my brother-in-law and Steve Kirkendall to help me, and he's from he spent a lot of his youth in the Young area, and so there's a lot of that area that's remote, and you can go out there and you won't see a human being for a mile, miles and miles and miles. And so we went up there and found a place that looked a little bit tough. Looked like they could really need some help to take a hand cart up. Maybe they'd have to take one at a time or something like that. And so we scheduled it out and said, okay, this looks like it ought to have a memorable experience. And it did. It did. It was probably one of the tougher experiences. I hear that it's picked up some monikers. You were telling me, what was...
Oh, the Baton Death March trek.
Yeah, it was a little bit on the tough side, and we found out that it can get tough enough to put some people down, and some of the adults went down, and when they went down, there wasn't a lot of humor left in them. And so it became a kind of a chore keeping spirits up. So I find out that, it was interesting. Even though some of the kids had a really rough time because their physical strength is limited, they all fought through it, and they helped each other. And for the life of me, I haven't found one of them that that really fought real bad. But some of the adults, they say, that's too tough. Well, yes, we found out that those experiences we read about in church history, there's a lot of truth in it. We had a lot of great activities. We did as like I say, I was able to work with the High Council, and we had some people step up, and we had some very memorable activities. Oh, I remember one that Brother Colby took a whole pig and got an oven that it would fit in, and we did the apple in the mouth, and really had some memorable times. We really did. It's been a great stake, and we have a lot of fond memories. And a few, like I say, they may call it the Baton March, but by and large, it's those are memories. I don't have any regrets at all about the things like that.
So one of the purposes of this year-long celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Globe Stake is to hopefully have inspiring, faith-promoting memories preserved, not just for the people who are still around today, but for people who are going to be in our stake in the church in this area in the future. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave with this with us with that in mind?
I just was thinking about that, and often when people are planning things, they want to plan it to be the smoothest, the easiest going and everything, but those aren't always the things that are the most memorable. I don't think people should shy away from things that are hard. A lot of the the work experiences. Like, I can think back to when we built that building in Hayden, Arizona, and we had a young man, he was married, he was rather short in stature, and I went out where he was digging a footer, and you couldn't see him, you couldn't see his shovel, all you could see was a puff of dirt coming out of that where he was digging, and it was hard. But those are things that you shouldn't shy away from. They're memorable, and he accomplished something. That building's still there, and there are other things that aren't still there because people were not willing to go the extra mile. And I think that looking forward, it's not looking forward to making it the easiest, but what have you done that you've given of yourself to make things that are hard come to pass? And so don't be afraid of that, because you'll grow, you will, and you'll think of what you were able to do, and the Lord wants us to be anxiously engaged in doing good. And so that's the one thing I would really, historically, is I would remember that. The hardest thing anyone ever did was the atonement. And that's the greatest thing of this life, is the hardest. So don't be afraid. And if you're given a calling, if it scares you to death, that's good. Say, I heard a great young man once say, I don't know if I can do that, but with the Lord's help, I can do anything. So that's my word of advice. Don't shy.
Well, I was going to ask you to finish with your testimony, but I think you just did. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I have a great love for those who've sacrificed and stepped up when the Lord needed help. Here am I, send me.
Well, thank you very much, Brother Griffith, and thank you for sharing some of these memories with us.